When the Saints go marching in, yes, I want to be in that number. When the Saints go marching in.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Total Saints podcast. This is our weekly get-together to discuss all things relating to Southampton Football Club. Now, as always, we're live streaming our podcast on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Twitch. So if you're watching along and it's Sunday night, you can leave your comments and questions as we go. A massive thank you to our TSP patrons. We couldn't do any of this podcasting without you. You can visit patreon.com/Total Saints podcast to find out more about getting involved. And thank you also to our sponsor for this week, NordVPN. NordVPN is great if you're looking to add extra layers of security to what you're doing online. You can protect yourself and your information whilst using public Wi-Fi on any device. And you can also use it to access streaming sites around the world. You can grab your exclusive deal by going to nordvpn.com/Total Saints to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, plus 4 months for free. It's completely risk-free as well with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And you can find the link in the show notes for the podcast and in the YouTube description. Now, coming up on the pod this week, getting anything at Anfield was always going to be a tall order for the new manager in his first game, and so it proved. We'll discuss what happened. Saints also progressed in the League Cup in midweek with a, well, should we say, less than convincing win over Sheffield Wednesday. We're going to look back at that game, and we'll have a little look ahead to what needs to be done during the World Cup break. My name's Martin Starke, and I'm joined this week by Steve Grant, the owner of SaintsWeb, Glen, Cour, the writer of the blog League 1-10, and Jacob Tanswell, who's the Southampton reporter for The Athletic. Underpinned by our TSP patrons, this is episode 214 of the Total Saints podcast. Nathan Jones's first game in charge ends with a 3-1 defeat at Anfield. Glen, what can we take from the new manager's first game? What were the positives?
I think most people would say that it was a better performance than we probably would have got under the previous manager. We had a goal threat, which was nice, and in the main, we seemed to, quite positive. We tried to play on the front foot most of the time. I think overall, it's a fairly decent performance. We obviously haven't got beaten by an embarrassing scoreline, which is always the first thing you look for. I like the second. I like the second half. I like the fact that we had all the sort of like main chances of the second half and forced their goalkeeper to do some work, because we just haven't been doing enough of that throughout the season. You could argue that Liverpool were slightly off the gas in the second half because of all their players going to the World Cup and all that sort of stuff, and they basically won the game by half time. But there have been games where we've had a set of circumstances where we could have gone for it this season, and we just haven't done so. So I was encouraged by that. We let in poor goals, which ultimately killed any chance of getting something out of the game. But I was just quite impressed the way we played, even when 3-1 down. But the key part of the game for me was after we got back to 1-1, there seemed a bit of lack of belief in the rest of the first half, and that was when we seemed to step off a little bit. And I think that's what Nathan Jones was probably alluding to, saying that we didn't sort of like stay in their face the whole game. But overall, I'm kind of quite happy that one's ticked off, and now we'll have the break, and hopefully things will start better when we get back.
It was an entertaining first 10-15 minutes, Steve, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was all action and kind of mirrored. Was it? I can't remember if it was last year or the year before where we also went up there and we should have scored inside about 20 seconds, and then within a minute we were still 1-0 down. And it kind of felt like just a really open game where neither side was particularly interested in defending too much. It's noticeable that we were able to get a lot more crosses into the box than we've done in previous games. But I'm not necessarily sure that was altogether sort of a change of attitude or a change of system from our point of view. I think it was more just that Liverpool's fullbacks were in the same way as our fullbacks absolutely don't close the ball down enough in wide areas. Liverpool's fullbacks were quite happy for us to sling the ball into the box as well. I mean, obviously, Adams got that early equaliser with a from the set piece, just running across in front of the keeper, getting there before Alisson got there. And Alisson again had to make a really good save from Adams again in the second half. So we created plenty of chances. Thanks to Liverpool's defending clearly their defence isn't what it was even a year ago, really. But certainly nowhere near what that imperious defence was when they won the title. And we caused them plenty of problems. I mean, I think, to be honest, both keepers were their side's best players. It could easily have finished 6-1. It could easily have finished 3-3. But for either better finishing or not so good goalkeeping. So yeah, I think it's one of those games you take the sort of minimal positives that you get out of basically not being thrashed. Take the sort of minor goal difference sort of win, if you like, and move on. I think. At the end of the day, our season isn't ever going to be judged by our record at Anfield.
Yeah.
So yeah, get out of there alive, and now you've got 4 or 5 weeks to put a plan of action in. The only problem is that the only 2 players we've got going away are basically our 2 centre backs. So creating a defensive system is going to be a little bit of a struggle, I feel, unless that linking game and even the Brighton game is going to be Coletta Sarr and Lianco as the defensive 2, which kind of seems unlikely.
Unlikely, yeah, unless they have a hell of a 6 weeks. Jacob, we'll get on to your day yesterday a bit later. Anyone that follows you on social media will know it was a long one, shall we say. Just focusing on the game, what were the main differences for you with the new manager in place? Could you see what he was trying to implement, or was it more of a watching brief?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by how brave he was, actually, because I did expect them just to come, perhaps sit in like a mid to low block, Southampton, and then just go route one. And from early on, I saw a team that were a lot more on the front foot, and they felt like they actually were playing to a plan, and they were naive at times in that first half. So it was basically like a Ralph Hasenhüttl performance in a way, in terms of being brave, but then still having those vulnerabilities at the back. And I know Steve talked about not having Bella-Kotchap and Selles, but I think that could be a blessing in disguise during the World Cup break, because as Nathan Jones alluded to afterwards, he felt the first half was quite passive. And from what we've seen this year, that's probably the most aggressive Southampton have been. So it just speaks volumes of how, passive they've been throughout the season. The reason why I think it's a blessing in disguise is because Southampton kept getting cut through on the counter, on transition all the time, because they weren't putting enough pressure on the ball from Liverpool's defence, which meant they could play out from the back quite easily. So I didn't think it was as much a centre-back problem, because they're obviously told by Nathan Jones to stay quite high, to stay aggressive on the front foot. But it was just so easy to play out from Southampton's press. They tried to press, but they weren't aggressive enough. So that alludes to Nathan Jones's comment about being passive. So I think if they can get to work in a 6-week break, just to work on those pressing systems, to work on just being more aggressive, more front foot, punching, above their weight, which Jones repeated a number of times already. I'm, really looking forward to seeing and encouraged by what Jones has done, because I thought he would come in and just sit back and go direct, when actually he was a lot more expansive. So overall, it was a really good learning lesson for him, and I think there's plenty more to come.
It's those defensive frailties again, isn't it, Glenn, that he's going to have to work on. That's what cost us yesterday. We kept getting caught a little high. I don't think as fans we really learn anything other than he's going to have his work cut out with the young, inexperienced squad of players that he's got to work with.
I thought he made one mistake, and that was not playing Maitland-Niles at right back from the start, because most of the problems we had seemed to go down that wing where, Elyounoussi, not my favourite player, but he's being asked to do a role he's not familiar with. And the amount of times that, he's playing against Robertson, who, despite being incredibly irritating, is a very good player down that wing. And, you have to be on your game to stop him. There was one down that side that resulted in a low cross and a great save from Bazunu, and the third goal came down that side where they just totally dozed off and allowed a simple sort of straight pass through the lines. So I thought,
Duff offside trap for that one as well.
yeah. Oh yeah, Salisu was about 3 yards behind, wasn't he? But yeah, it was poor defending in general. I mean, the free kick that led to the first goal, Salah bought that because he knocked the ball one side and then he knew he wasn't going to get it, so he jumped into Kaletasha and got the free kick. But it's decent movement from Firmino, but two of our players are just watching him, and so that was a poor goal to concede.
Is Firmino even trying to score that?
I'm not sure.
I'm not convinced that's a shot.
Just trying to get a touch on it, I think.
Yeah, he's trying to flick it on for someone running in, isn't he? And I don't know. Bazunu seemed to be on the wrong foot as well. I think he might look at that one and think he should maybe have done better. Second goal was, we had a chance to clear that. I think we had two chances to clear it. Didn't get a foot to it and clear it, and then Elliott crossed it in and good finish by Darwin, wasn't it? Darwin Núñez. And the third goal I've already done, which was the poor concentration on the right hand side. So yeah, there was a couple of other chances, wasn't there, when Bella-Kotchap let the ball roll under his foot, and I would think he was pretty fortunate to get away with hauling down Salah in the second half. I think Salah threw himself again, but it was probably a foul. But the fact that the arms went in the air as usual probably meant that he didn't get it. So yeah, lots of work to do defensively. But if the midfield and the attack, as Jacob said, if they don't do their job in closing down, then the defense is going to come under a lot of pressure, and any defense cracks, and that's Steve's point about what's happening with Liverpool at the moment, is that they are letting in goals because they're allowing crosses into the box, and they're allowing teams to play through them as well, and that's what we did in the second half. I mean, playing 1-2s around the edge of the box and finding ourselves sort of clean through on the goalkeeper, that doesn't normally happen up there. So yeah, it's a team responsibility to defend, and that's what I'm sure Nathan Jones will be working on in the 5-6 weeks, whatever it is.
We were creating the chances, though, Steve, yesterday. I think the XG was half decent, and it's been a big week for Che Adams. Getting a run on Van Dijk was quite nice, and a decent header for the goal. It sounds like he's going to be quite key to the new manager's plans. He was talking quite enthusiastically about him yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, he is, for all his limitations, he's still our top scorer in the last 18 months, 2 years or so. So ultimately, you've still got to focus your team and your sort of attacking ambition around your best players. I mean, we all know that I think we've all got an idea of how many goals we expect someone like Che Adams should be able to score in the Premier League, and it's a case of being able to fit a system around him that gives him enough opportunities that he will score that many goals or more. And that comes down to sort of playing as a unit. The last few games we created loads of chances, we just missed them. I mean, you look at the XG for the Newcastle game. I mean, we've been beaten 4-1. Their XG was about 1.4, something ridiculous, and ours was about 1.8, I think. So we created so much more than they did, but we just missed everything. Same against Palace. Same against teams like Everton earlier in the season, Wolves, and it's just been finishing that has been our big letdown, and then switching off at the other end. So if you can improve both of those facets of the game by a fraction, all of a sudden, I mean, you look at how tight the bottom half of the Premier League is; it's ridiculous. Like literally, a win would take us 12th, I think. Still, it's insane at the moment how tight the league is, and we've been on the wrong end of a load of really tight differential games this season, and we've just got to find that little extra, that little 1%. That's going to make the difference. And to be honest, I think that's what they're looking at with the change of manager, is that he can just eke out something a little bit different. Maybe the messaging from Ralph had gone a little bit stale. If you're repeating the same messaging and it wears off after a while, new manager, even if he comes in and basically says the same thing just in a Welsh accent, But it just feels different, and and you've then got all of a sudden, I mean, Adams now presumably now with a little bit more confidence going into this break. Also now has a month to work out sleep patterns as a new dad. And yeah, I mean, we then looked to that Lincoln game as I said last week. It's a great opportunity to use that Lincoln game now. I mean, I don't think that draw could have gone any better for us. And
opening up, isn't it?
Yeah, well, potentially. I mean, you got City against Liverpool. I mean, all the other big clubs avoid each other, but yeah, get through that, and who knows? And we can use it as a good sort of testing ground ahead of that Brighton game when we restart.
And Jacob, great to see Lavia start for the first time since August yesterday. Him and Ward-Prowse. I think Prowse seemed to have a better game, maybe.
Yeah.
But Lavia seemed to just add that bit of extra composure, perhaps, that's been missing.
He's phenomenal, isn't he? I've kind of forgot just how experienced he does look. I know he's only 18, but he just looks so calm and composed. He had a little 10-minute spell in the first half where he looks a little bit ragged, and I could hear Nathan Jones just geeing him up a little bit. But in terms of how he manages to pick the ball up against three of Liverpool's midfield, who are pretty established players, and just dictated it. I think there was 20 minutes towards the end where he was just passing through them time and time again, and he keeps the ball so well. He just sits there, and some of the things you see, you can't actually see. Some of the important things, he allows Ward-Prowse, like you touched on, Martin, to get forward. He allows Stuart Armstrong, who I thought was quite good in that first half, and that left-sided number 8 role to get forward, and sometimes lose the ball because he has someone like Lavia who can cover those spaces either side of him. So just having that player Lavia back is, it's going to be so important, and it's really important. I think Jones said it afterwards as well, that they don't overdo him, because you saw that he's still feeling it. He did so many recovery runs towards the end, and you just saw that there was going to be cramp coming up shortly. So it's important that Southampton don't rest too much on him, which I think Hasenhüttl was guilty of doing after 3 or 4 games practically. So they've just got to manage him well. But with Lavia, Southampton are a completely different side. So much better in possession, looks so much more polished, organised, and our midfield suddenly has a little bit of shape. Because if you see some of the games that Southampton have played, West Ham second half, they're all over the place, and it's caused them basically to sink into their shells. You saw that in the second half against West Ham and Bournemouth. But if you have Lavia, someone who could just basically take away any pressure, can keep the ball, and it's going to be so important in those crunch moments. So hopefully he can just kick on from here. And it's a shame that he didn't get into the Belgium squad, because I thought he would.
I was going to get onto the World Cup squads a little later, Glenn, but do you think, in a way, Prowse not going means that it's got to be better for us, isn't it? That he can stay and he can work with Lavia, and the pair of them will get 6 weeks together and get a few friendly games and whatever they got planned.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't do us any harm as a team. In terms of this season, what it means longer term when Ward-Prowse is assessing his career options, not getting in the England squad again, is another story altogether. But as far as this 5 weeks and trying to get ready for the rest of this season is concerned, I think it's definitely a good thing that he's not going. And that he's the sort of guy he's not going to sulk. I think it's already been addressed already by Nathan Jones. He's just going to get his head down and get on with it. And I like Jacob said there, I liked the look of the midfield actually having 3 players in there, because I think that the 2-player thing that Ralph seemed to favour was just wearing a bit thin. We just seemed to be getting smashed all over the place virtually every time we tried it. So if Jones can establish a sort of 2 behind and 1 in front type of midfield 3, then I think that would be a positive going forward. And I think that's kind of the blueprint he used at Luton. It was sort of like 2 holding midfielders and 1 number 10. So yeah, all good. So yeah, Ward-Prowse not going. In answer to the question, I think certainly
in the short term
in terms of this season, it is a good thing. But whether he decides at the end of the season that he needs to make a move as a result of it, then that's another thing.
Yeah, Steve, I know you went on the little bonus pod during the week about the new manager. Obviously, it's been confirmed. He's had his first game. He's done his interviews. What are your thoughts on the appointment, and have the interviews done enough to convince you and win you over, or is it a case of waiting and see what happens with that run of games after the World Cup?
Yeah, I think it's wait and see. I must admit, I was fairly underwhelmed. Initial reaction, it was like, really? Because there's just
Nathan who?
yeah. Well, no, I mean, I obviously knew who he was, but you look at the body of work at Luton. He's obviously achieved great things with a club of that size to have got them as an established sort of upper half Championship side, given where they were when he first took over. But the one time he decided to get out of his comfort zone there and go to Stoke, it was an absolute disaster. Now, whether that's just a case of it's just one of those jobs where anybody who took that Stoke job at that time was basically doomed to fail because of the circumstances at the club. They had a load of overpaid wasters who'd gotten relegated and had no interest in putting a shift in, and as a result, it was just a case of, well, whoever takes this job is screwed, basically. In some similar way to like when Moyes had the Man United job, everyone knew that was going to be an absolute disaster for that first season. Obviously, it then turned out to be a disaster for everyone else for the next 10 years as well, which has been hilarious. But yeah, I think with Jones, it was more that you look at the way both his Luton and Stoke sides have played, and I mean, I get that it's. You kind of make the most of what you've got available to you. But given the amount of time he'd been at Luton, if he wanted to evolve into a more sort of aesthetically pleasing, shall we say, style of football, then he would have he had time to do that. And I mean, Luton were high energy, but it was very sort of up and at 'em, which I mean works for a small club playing the underdog card in the Championship. I'm not sure it really works for a side in the Premier League, to be honest. But we'll see. I mean, it may well be, as I say, it may well be that he's just pragmatic based on what he's got available. Because let's be honest, that style of football ain't going to work with the players we've got. That's for sure. So yeah, he's got to find a system that works with what he's got available. Which I kind of think probably won't be an awful lot different to what we've seen this season already, but hopefully with slightly more positive outcomes.
Okay. Glen took one for the team and went to see the Sheffield Wednesday game. So I'm going to come to you to relive that in all its glory in just a minute,
Yeah.
Glen. But Jacob, I just want to touch on we mentioned it earlier, your journey yesterday and the piece that you've got coming out on Monday. You properly put in the miles yesterday.
To be fair, looking back in, I quite enjoyed it in a weird sort of way. So I woke up at 5:30, got to the stop, which was, I think it was the second stop on the coach journey. So it picked us up at about 6:15, and it took about an hour and a half to get out of Hampshire because of all the other stops. So that wasn't ideal, but it was fine. Went to Cheveley, met a nice man named Chris, and we just nattered for the next 5.5, 6 hours from the coach. Got to Liverpool. I had to walk around Anfield 3 times to try and find where the hell the accreditation point was. No one seemed to know or seemed to really want to help.
And everybody else was just going to the pub, I guess.
Yeah,
you
everyone wanted
were
to go. Yeah, and I had to try and find the accreditation, and then got in, watched the game, really enjoyed the game, and then had to come straight back out because the coach was leaving in 15 minutes. And for a coach that actually was leaving in 15 minutes and trying to get through swaves of Liverpool fans coming in the opposite direction was pretty difficult. But I think it makes for quite a good piece. I'm looking forward to seeing what people think about it tomorrow, Monday morning.
I was trying to think. The last time I did the Travel Club, is it still called the Travel Club? That was the last.
I think it was Way Travel or something. Yeah.
I think it would have been Highbury when Dennis Bergkamp scored was the last time. And I know that it's been a while for you as well, Glen.
West Ham 1991, when it took about 5 hours to drive from the Dell to Upton Park, and I vowed never again at that point.
Well, we'll look forward to reading the piece when it's out, Jacob. No, I mentioned about the game on Wednesday night in the League Cup through to the next round, but my word, that was if there was any talk of the squad trying to impress the new manager who was sitting in the stands, Glen, they certainly didn't.
No, well, some did. Some did okay, and some were downright awful. And the overall the overall thing about the game is that if Sheffield Wednesday hadn't given away that brain dead penalty, because anyone who is in the Premier League knows that if Musa Gineppo does his step over things, you don't bother tackling him. You just let him tackle himself and fall over. And the guy stuck his foot in, over went Gineppo, and we got a totally undeserved, 1-1 scoreline at half time. If they hadn't given away that penalty, I don't think we'd have scored, and we'd have ended up losing 1-0. Bottom line is we needed 7 penalties to beat a League One side. We didn't really do much from open play. I remember 2 chances that Theo Walcott missed where the goalkeeper just gave him the ball basically on the edge of the box. So we didn't create anything for that. And there was a free kick that Ward-Prowse rolled to Stuart Armstrong and he hit it well and it hit the bar. So we're a little bit unfortunate there. Second half, we were the better side and we did improve. Obviously, some words were spoken at half time. And the penalties were amazingly good. We all, everyone, I don't think the goalie went the right way once. McCarthy went the right way a couple of times. He got a good hand to the first one that went in. And when you see the big centre back coming up to take number 6, you kind of, or number 7, you kind of know that this is where they're going to miss. So I wasn't surprised that the player, it was Iorfa. I wasn't surprised that he was the one that missed, just having seen him walk up. But bottom line is none of it matters. We're through to the next round. We got Lincoln just before Christmas, which would be nice. So but it wasn't the best game. And if Nathan Jones was in the stand, I was disappointed by the lack of effort or perceived effort by some players to impress. The forward line was Sekou Mara, Adam Armstrong, Joe Aribo, dreadful. Just really, really bad. And the lack of movement, which I've talked about before, was absolutely chronic in the first half. They got Sheffield Wednesday are a big physical side, and they got bullied as well. Especially Armstrong and Mara just got knocked over all the time. There was no strength there, and Joe Aribo looked like he was playing in moon boots. It just didn't move. It was just, I know he's very languid in style, but that only covers so, that only gets away with so much. I just thought it was disappointing from the forwards, and that's why we struggled. And it comes back to Steve's point earlier on. Che Adams is the best striker we've got by a long, long way, and despite all his flaws. So. But anyway, we won the game. We're through to the next round.
I did find it funny when they were doing the penalties and they're all on the halfway line like you have to, or in the centre circle, and they're all holding on to each other and they're all cheering like it was the semi-final of the Euros.
Yeah,
not like we've just beaten a League One. Yeah, very, very interesting. Jacob, a couple of people mentioned Ruben Selles. Stewart says, with Chris Cohen coming in, set-piece specialist, has there been any talk about what Ruben Selles' role might be? That was a big night for him, wasn't it? He got to do the press conference before. He got to do, obviously, the team talks. They had that little huddle on the pitch afterwards. And he just impressed whenever he was in front of the media. And from the team were definitely playing for him.
Yeah, I think Alan Sheehan's going to be the one doing set pieces. Chris Cohen will be the assistant manager. Ruben Selles, I was so impressed with him after the game. I think it was a real good opportunity for him to basically introduce himself, because as an assistant coach or first team coach, he hasn't always got the opportunity to speak to the media or speak to the media and through the prism of the media to the fans. So I thought he was really good. I thought he was really clear. And I know it was a stodgy game. It was pretty difficult, but it just felt fairly uplifting towards the end. That's how I took it anyway. It just felt like after such a few hard couple of months, with the tension, with just everything just feeling in the balance the whole time, just have that win, that little bit of a celebration, that little trundle to Alex McCarthy, congratulating him on saving that penalty, and Sellers, getting the team in that group, and then afterwards he just installed so much confidence in that team. He dismissed any notion of getting relegated. He's got such big belief in these players, and you can see why the players really, really like him. In terms of how his role will change, I think he will still be a real vocal presence on the training ground. Like I say, in pre-season, he led most of the sessions, and that was concerted plan by Sport Republic to take the burden off Harsington, who they thought was just basically the only voice, and they needed a bit of a freshen up. Issue was when the competitive fixtures came in, Ralph then came back in. So I think Nathan Jones likes to share it around a little bit more. So having 5, the addition of Carl Martin, 5 dynamic coaches who can all coach really well on the grass, it's only going to be a positive. Selles' strengths lie in shaping structure defensively, so he'll take the defence and that side of the game, and then Chris Cohen, Sheehan, Jones himself, Carl Martin can focus on other aspects. So hopefully over the next 4 or 5 weeks they can really understand that and build that relationship together.
I was going to talk about the first half of the season and kind of like do a review, but it feels like the club have already done that, and they've done the review and they've said it's not good enough. They've pulled the trigger. They've got the new manager in. He had maybe 2 games to look at the squad, and he knows what he's got to do. And as Jacob says there, the new coaches that are coming in, I just every way you look at it, this World Cup break is an absolute blessing in disguise for me. And Steve, I just want to touch on what we're going to look for, what he needs to be working on, what the priorities are. Is it going to be obviously can't bring anybody in yet, but is it going to be more about his culture and his vision and just getting that instilled? It all seems that it all seems quite positive at the moment. It's that pre-season enthusiasm that we all have.
Yeah, I mean it'll be interesting to see what they do in terms of sort of friendlies and training camps and stuff. I think they're
having a week off first, aren't they?
Going to Spain, I think, is the plan from what I gather. But yeah, it'd be like warm winter training, bit of a social thing to make sure that everybody's sort of spirits are high going into the because I mean, let's be honest, that run of games at the start, once we get restarted, is going to be a grind, because there's a game, basically 2 or 3 games a week. It's going to be tiring for the players. You're going to have to be sort of using the squad as best as you can. I mean, we know that we don't have a massive squad in terms of first team ready players. So you're probably going to there might even be a little bit of prioritizing in terms of which fixtures you're targeting for sort of going all out. But I think it'll be. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced Nathan Jones will change an awful lot. As I said, system wise, I think, because even though you've got a month, you're missing 2 of your key components of that for the whole period. Excuse me. Well, for at least 2 or 3 weeks anyway, because not sure how well Ghana and Germany will fare. But you need to be able to start working on the defensive unit, because that's been a problem for basically 3 or 4 years, more or less since Mark Hughes was manager, I guess, really. Because I think defensively we were fine under Puel and then okay under Pellegrino, and it just kind of fell apart under Hughes in the end. So I think that's got to be a key focus. I think we're creating, as I said earlier, I think we're creating enough chances against good sides as well a lot of the time. We just need to be more clinical. Whether that's something you can get better at in training when you've already played at this level for a while, I don't know. I think that's kind of one of those sort of unanswered intangibles, isn't it? That you either improve what you've got or you buy better. The problem is that the World Cup being when it is, you're going to have a lot of players possibly on the market in January for hugely inflated fees. So while we were, by the sounds of it, willing to shell out best part 30 million in the summer just gone, that 30 million in January isn't going to go anywhere near as far. So got to be very, very smart on any transfer business that we look at. But we'll wait and see. I mean, we've kind of heaped praise on the owners to a certain extent over the summer in their willingness to put money in and fund all these new signings without having to sell any of our sort of key first team players. So it'd be a case of whether they're willing to back that up again this time around. I suspect they will, but I think they'll be looking for. They'll still be looking for value. I don't think we'll just be throwing money around willy-nilly.
Yeah. And ordinarily, Glen, 19th at Christmas would be a bit of a disaster. But as we were kind of alluding to, it feels like they are already on top of this. They're already perhaps a week ahead of where they could have been had they given Ralph the Liverpool game. So it feels like the only way is up, and it is a proper reset all round.
Yeah, it does, and the fact that we're not cut adrift or anything like that. That at the end of the day, we've got to look at our own performances. The league table looks after itself. People get too obsessed with it, I feel, especially in the first half of the season. It's only really relevant the last sort of 10 games when it starts. It's like scoreboard pressure a little bit if you're in the bottom three. I don't think that's the case at the moment. Yeah, I agree. If we hadn't pulled the trigger already, we would be at the point we're at today thinking, is it going to be tomorrow? Is it going to be next week? How much of this 4-week break, 5-week break are we going to waste, before we appoint someone else? So yeah, I definitely think it's the right thing. And yeah, as Nathan Jones has said himself, it gives him that period of time to try and get some more of his ideas across. And what's encouraging for me is the first thing. I know the players aren't really going to say anything different, but the first noises from the players it's been encouraging, and because that's the worry at some clubs, not necessarily us, would be that if you'd taken a manager who'd never managed in the Premier League before, that the big time Charlies wouldn't listen. But I don't think we've got many of those or any of those, and and B, it does look like they do seem quite happy, and that will have been music to Che Adams' ears, that Jones is saying that
I can get him scoring goals.
I can make him a better striker. Now, whether that turns out to be true or not, it's a good thing to hear as a striker, because strikers, it's all about confidence. So yeah, I'm quite happy with the way things have worked out from a timing point of view, and I don't think there's anything to worry about too much just yet. But if we lose 3 or 4 games in December, January, then
when you look at those first few fixtures back as well, obviously there's a cup game, then it's Brighton, I think it's Fulham, and then it's Forest, isn't it? And 2 of those at home. So that's where you want to be picking up those points, don't you? It couldn't be kinder to him, really.
Well, it couldn't.
Added pressure because they're weak, because they're supposed weaker teams, and you're under pressure to win those games.
The season we got relegated in 2005, when Steve Wigley was in charge, we had a run of 6 or 7 home games against dodgy teams, and we beat Portsmouth, and we didn't win any of the others, and that was ultimately what killed us. That meant at the end of the season we were trying to beat Arsenal or trying to beat Man United to stay up, but it was that run of games, the home games against the teams that are going to be around us, that killed us. So luckily we've only really, I would say, thrown the Everton one so far. We've lost it away at teams we should have got something out of: Palace, Villa, who's the other one? Wolves, who are now rock bottom. So we haven't, in my opinion, wasted too many games. But this is what said last week about he has to hit the ground running, and we have to pick up points in those games that you've just mentioned.
So having built up that little run of games then, Jacob, what does the next 6 weeks look like? Do you know, are they going away? Have they got a couple of friendlies booked in? Are they going to a week off and then reset?
Yeah, so the initial plan was to go to Miami, but they didn't have any games scheduled. I think they were trying to, but they didn't have any penciled in officially. And they were going to give the first 2 weeks of this break off to the players, to the club staff and stuff like that. The Miami trip, from what I heard on Friday, so it's probably changed by now, was up in the air. The consensus was they're leaning against that, obviously with a new manager, new ideas, what he wants as well. So they will go on a mini camp somewhere, and we'll have games. And I think it's only a week off now rather than 2. So I think it's so important that Jones does get his message across nice and early. I think in the last 4 or 5 months, maybe, I think the clarity's become a little bit diluted because of changes of formation. There wasn't much system, it wasn't one system. They were changing a lot, and that's because Ralph and the coaching staff were just trying to find some points, and that's understandable. But I think what Jones is going to try and do is just really embed a clear messaging. get this young group of players to understand their roles in, out of possession. And I think he's a different manager who naturally carries different strengths and weaknesses to Hasenhüttl, and I think he'll be that more personable. I think if they do go away, I think it will give a better opportunity for him to learn about his players, to put an arm around their shoulders. And for a guy like Che Adams, for example, who's taken such a battering sometimes from fans, from media, general, I think having that guy, that manager who just unprompted sometimes just gives him praise, I think that's going to be a real boost to his confidence, and hopefully that spreads throughout the team as well. So I think they will go away, and hopefully, as we keep saying throughout this podcast, it's going to be a real benefit for them.
There'll be lots of pictures on social media of the players looking happy and smiling during training, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just one final thing on the Che Adams thing. He's gone from a manager who's basically wanted to sell him in the summer and then decided the best way to use him was to smash long balls up to him. And he criticised him all the time, going back, left him out of the FA Cup semi-final and all that sort of stuff. So he's gone from that manager to a new manager who's basically said, he's our best striker. I'm going to make him a better striker. He's very important to me. So that's a massive difference right from the start.
Yeah, really good. A couple of more things before we finish. Dan's been in touch. He says, do you think the women's team is going to repeat Nigel Adkins' championship performance? They're certainly more entertaining to watch than the men's team at the moment. Rewarded with a load of international call-ups. Cheers for getting in touch, Dan. Obviously, Marianne Spacey-Cale picked up the Women's Championships Manager of the Month award for October. And there were some goals as well today on international duty, I think you were saying, Steve.
Lucia Kendall got a couple. I think it was a day or two ago for the England under-19s against Norway. So she's a key player in that team by the looks of it. A couple of others I think were on the bench for the under-20. Was it 21s or 23s possibly? The other day, Kayla Rendell and Paige Peake. Were in the squad for that, but I don't think they got any action in that game.
It's nice to see Glen another bit of silverware, albeit a Manager of the Month award for the women's team. They're going to need a bigger trophy cabinet with all the things they keep picking up.
Yeah, what's the situation with promotion? Is it one up on a playoff, or is it
just one up?
Just one up, and that's so it's going to be
same
difficult.
old nonsense.
Yeah, but why not? Why not? The way they're playing at the moment, they must fancy their chances to beat anybody, and they seem to have a strong squad because there's international players on the bench at the moment who are not getting games. So Spacey-Cale has obviously found a way to win these games. Most of them have been tight, and fair play. Long may it continue. There may be some bumps in the road, and obviously you can't afford to have too many if you're just aiming for basically being champions, and that's all you've got to aim for. But I mean, I'm sure the first ambition for this season was to make sure that they could handle the league that they're in and not be near the bottom. Well, they've already answered that. So
took them a couple of games, didn't it, to get going? But once they adjusted, it's been good so far.
They're obviously very at home in this division now, and the players will be getting more and more confident that they can do well in this league. So momentum in football is a huge thing. When the men's team got promoted at the championship, it was all about the momentum. Once we got going, they top two all season. So why not?
Some good attendances as well. A lot of people taking in the football, which is good. Jacob, there's one other story this week, just with your Financial Times hat on, about the additional borrowing against the club. There was a lot of misinformation, it seemed to me, that was flying around about this. I know you were able to kind of confirm this and sum it up rather eloquently in just one tweet, I think, about what's going on with this and the money from America.
You might have to remind me what I tweeted, because there's been so many things going on this week.
Have you had a busy week?
No, but I think the story,
the loan and the refinancing, wasn't it?
Yeah, the story did obviously carry some truth in terms of the 80 million, but it's the way it was written and portrayed. It was slightly different. The simple fact is that Slamson are just trying to refinance on a lower interest rate. It's nothing to worry about. They're not taking out any loans or anything that's going to put the financial safety of the club at risk. So that just needed clearing up, and I tried to fit it into as many 140 characters or whatever it is on Twitter.
I guess it's like any of us would do, Steve. If we had a massive loan with a 10% interest rate, you'd be shopping around a bit.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, it's pretty mad that we even ended up signing that agreement, because that seems way above sort of any sort of commercial rate that you would ever get. And I mean, the Premier League football club would seem to me, with the Premier League broadcast money and the parachute payments if you go down, would seem to be just an absolute dead cert that you get your money back. So for them to be charging those sort of interest rates and for us to agree to it was pretty silly, I think, really. But yeah, I would assume that the new deal is on much preferential rate. So yeah, should save us a fair few million over the next decade or so, I suppose.
You don't need Martin Lewis on the podcast to work that out, do you? I guess.
No.
Just on the predictions as well, one of us got the score right yesterday. Do we know who that is? The guy that's smiling, bottom right.
Oh, was it me?
Like a Cheshire cat? Yeah. So that means going into the World Cup break, producer Alex is still top of the league, 14 points. Then it's Glen and Alfie tied on 13. Somehow I've got 8, and then Ben's on 6, Steve's on 6, and Jacob's bringing out the rear on 5.
Oh, I'm gonna change from the after World Cup break. I'm gonna stop predicting Southampton to win, because I think I've predicted Southampton to win every game but one. So I'm actually going to do it calculated this time.
It's because you're new to this.
You're like a crap Mark Lawrence.
We haven't dragged you down to the cynical level of the rest of us yet.
And on the Fantasy Premier League as well, which we've been doing, Charlie Hawkins looks like going to be top for Christmas. Ilya Markov is going to be second, and Tom McCann is going to be third. It's probably the less said about us for the better in terms of the FPL at the moment. But let's just say there's all to play for when we come back after the break. That's pretty much it for this week. Don't forget, you can follow Total Saints Podcast on Facebook and on Twitter. It's at Total Saints Pod. On the website as well, totalsaints.co.uk. There's a link on there to our online shop, which is the Total Saints icons, and you can drop us an email there if you like during the week, or maybe over the next 6 weeks, because it'd be great to hear from you. We're also on Patreon, where you can find out more about supporting the podcast with a monthly contribution. It's patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. We've got 4 tiers on there, ranging from £5 to £20 a month, and each comes with their own perks, including weekly shout outs for those patrons in our Francis Benali or our Mick Shannon tier. So thank you to Dave Melton, Mark Adkins, Matt Hall, who are in our Francis Benali tier, and also Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Matt Rose, and Nick Reed, who are in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Steve. Thanks to Jacob for your time. Thank you for listening. No pod next week, but we are planning on doing one after the England game, so we can just review the World Cup and how that's going, and any Saints news that may have dropped or broken. If I don't see you before, have a great Christmas and enjoy the World Cup, and look out for the announcements and some extra